G'day, welcome to the Nerdy Dad channel and the first ever Nerdy Dad Rewind review. The first season of The Bad Batch is over a year old at this point, but I flash up a spoiler warning just to be on the ultra safe side. I don't know if anyone clicking on this video isn't aware, but there's a second season of The Bad Batch coming out later this year. The first trailer, released at Celebration a couple of months ago, looked absolutely awesome. Hands up Clone Wars fans who want to see Gungi return. It's a Wookiee Jedi, for crying out loud. Alright, so with the new season coming out soon, I thought season 1 was definitely due for a rewatch. So, please join me as I talk about The Bad Batch, starting with the first episode, Aftermath. Aftermath was directed by Stuart Lee, Saul Ruiz, and Nathaniel Villanueva. And in a show about a team of clones, voice actor D. Bradley Baker plays just about everyone. At more than twice the length of any other episode in the series, Aftermath clocks in at 76 minutes and essentially plays as a movie. But, unlike the original Clone Wars movie, which feels like a bunch of episodes strung together, which it was, Aftermath feels right, and the length just gives us an epic and detailed introduction into the world of The Bad Batch. Speaking of the world and the setting, The Bad Batch is based not just in the Star Wars universe, it specifically follows on from the Clone Wars animated series, which is a series I absolutely love. It's also where the Bad Batch were originally introduced, and everything about the beginning of Aftermath is designed to remind us of the Clone Wars. The red Clone Wars logo from Season 7 burns away to reveal the Bad Batch logo, leading into a voiceover which sets the scene in the same way that the Clone Wars episodes did. And that voiceover tells us that the opening scene is set on Kala, where we meet Deepa Billaba and her Padawan Caleb Dume, voiced by the not very Padawan-aged Freddie Prinze Jr. He doesn't sound like a child, but you couldn't get anyone else to voice his iconic role from Rebels. And this is where the Bad Batch are introduced. Hunter, Crosshair, Tech, Wrecker, and Echo easily destroy the droids that had Master Bilaba's clone squad pinned down. But this is just before Order 66. We get one of the many retellings of Order 66 from a different point of view, as Deepa Billaba is turned on by her clones, and she sacrifices herself so Caleb can get to safety. I'm going to acknowledge the canon controversy here, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I haven't read the canon comic, but I am aware that they made some changes when they essentially did the same scene in The Bad Batch, and I understand the frustration that some of the comic readers had. I felt the same frustration when they changed the opening scene of the Ahsoka novel, which I have read, when they redid that scene in the final season of the Clone Wars. Back to the episode. The Batch, being different to the rest of the clones, are not affected by Order 66. They do not immediately turn on the Jedi, and are confused by what's going on. Hunter, trying to work out what is going on, tries to talk to the Padawan Caleb, and this creates conflict with Crosshair, who is being a good soldier and following orders, despite also not being aware of just what's going on. Anyone who's watched Rebels realized that Caleb had to escape. The war is over, and the Batch returns to Kamino, but something is off. Almost immediately, they are greeted by the sight of a dead Jedi being carried off on a stretcher. They don't have much time before there's a mandatory assembly of all the clone troopers. And here is where we see a different point of view of the Darth Sidious Emperor Palpatine Senate speech from Revenge of the Sith. And while I love the Batch themselves and their adventures, possibly my favourite thing about this series is the way that it shows the transition from Republic to Empire in a way that no other Star Wars show has, and that starts right here in the first episode of the series. Something I didn't mention is that the Batch have a tiny bit of downtime between returning to Kamino and the assembly, and this is where Tech introduces the rest of the Batch to the concept that the Regs, which is what the Batch call regular clones, and possibly them as well, have been programmed. Order 66 and the inhibitor chips are an important theme throughout much of the series. It's now time to talk about Omega. We don't find out until very near the end of the series just how far back her connection to the Batch goes. But what we do know in this first episode is that, like the Batch, she is not a standard clone. We watch her connect with the Batch, first in the hall, and then later in the mess hall. Around this time, Grand Moff Tarkin enters the picture. Not holding Vader's leash at this time, I wonder if the Kaminoans noticed his foul stench when he came on board. His plan is to switch from the clone troopers, which are grown, to stormtroopers that are recruited. But in the meantime, Prime Minister Lama Su convinces him to evaluate the capabilities of the specialized clones of the Bad Batch. They overcome the challenge in the training yard, but the real test is a mission to Onderon. Now, my introduction to Onderon was in the Legends KOTOR games, but in canon, most of the time we spend on Onderon is in the 5th season of the Clone Wars, where we were introduced to Saul Guerrero and his guerrillas. There is great irony in Anakin Skywalker training rebels, and it is these rebels that the Batch have been sent to hunt down. But it's not just soldiers that the Batch is sent to kill. It's families. It's children and the elderly. And given that the Batch assumed they were being sent to hunt down droids, it's too much. Against orders and against Crosshair's wishes, Hunter orders them to stand down. Good soldiers follow orders. Those chilling words from Tup in the Clone Wars Season 6 echoes through this whole episode. Upon their return, the Batch gets thrown into lockup for their insubordination. Omega is also in the lockup after she got caught sneaking into the Batch's quarters. Crosshair is taken, and the effectiveness of his inhibitor chip is improved. While he's being experimented on by the Kaminoans, the rest of the Batch, now including Omega, escape captivity. The Batch search for Crosshair, but Crosshair's inhibitor chip has been turned up to 11. He serves the Empire, even against his squad mates, his brothers. Crosshair leads a bunch of regs to cut off the Batch's escape. The Bad Batch do escape Kamino with the help of the Kaminoan chief medical scientist, Nala Se, and their escape leads to the rest of the series. There are so many small moments which really make the episode, such as Omega's conversation with Crosshair in the lockup. Look, when the series was first airing, I was one of those in the camp, she's a Force-sensitive clone. Of course, that turned out not to be the case. Not unless they do a massive about-face in Season 2. But yeah, she's an awesome character. And of course in Star Wars, whenever you meet a young, intuitive character, you go, Jedi. She has to be a Jedi. If you stuck around this long, please give the video a like. And I hope you come back for the remainder of the Rewind reviews when I look at the rest of the Bad Batch Season 1. This is the Nerdy Dad, signing off.